in North America.
Oh, okay.
I wish I was there.
Jim, now that COVID's over, are you planning on still staying in Saigon?
No, it's a mess here, and I have to make plans soon. Right now, we can't move, so it's just you can't do anything. So the situation has gone from probably one of the safest places in the world to one of the least vaccinated and worst with the variant. So it's just not a happy scene here.
Oh,
And that all changed in 6 weeks.
wow.
Is that because of the Delta, the variant?
Yeah, yeah.
Are you
Well,
vaccinated? Have you been vaccinated?
No.
No.
And I'm on a list, but they don't say when.
Oh.
And if I have to come back, you have to get a pre-screening, get the flight, and that's be one of the first things I do. But that's all a fait accompli at this point. The whole thing has changed in the past 6 weeks, so it's just been very sudden.
What a shame.
How about underground?
Yeah.
Can you control the
Yeah.
Ah, there he is.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear us okay? I can see Muriel saying yes. Muriel, can you hear us okay?
It's very echoey,
Really?
like you're in a tunnel.
Like in a tunnel. That's because we are in a tunnel.
Okay, so be it.
We're called the library at Temple Bat Yam. And I have a few friends here with me. Rob, you want to say hi?
Hey everyone, Shabbat
Just
Shalom.
look at the owl. They'll be able to see you at the owl. There's Rob.
Shabbat Shalom.
We got, let's see here, we got me. There's me. There's Sue.
Hi, everyone.
Sue Pan. And let's see, how do I find Ellen? There's Ellen.
Shabbat Shalom.
We are experimenting with coming back in person. Muriel, could you hear Rob, Ellen, and Sue when they came through?
Yes, I did.
Okay, not ideal, but you could make them out?
I can make them out. It just has that tunnel feature, but beyond that, I can make them out clearly.
Okay, so what you'll notice is on your screen, if you make us the full screen on your screen, you'll see at the top, there is a very strange panoramic view. That is the view of the entire room. Right now, it's got 4 people in it. And I can actually move the camera around and zero in on people who may be speaking, like me. Hi, everybody. So the hope is, well, actually, I can tell you now, we're gonna do this next week in person with everyone who wants to be here, and anyone who needs to be not here can Zoom in, because we want to do this hybrid style. So let's go around and check in and see if anyone has anything they want to dedicate this Torah study to. I'll start with the folks here. Sue Penn, I'm going to give you a minute because you're not used to this tradition. Rob, anything you'd like to dedicate this Torah study to?
So I would like to dedicate this to all of us coming together gradually and safely. And I think it would be a great reunion when we all sit together and study Torah together. And I found out for sure, and I've confirmed it today, that bagels are better at Bat Yam.
We do have some Einstein's bagels here, courtesy of Rob, and I think Ellen also brought some snacks, so thank you. Nancy, we may need to get the calendar back up and running.
Someone is going to have to take that over since I am not there.
Oh, we're going to need to look for a volunteer. Maybe Sue can help find a volunteer for us. Nancy, for I don't know how many years, 20 years?
Since Torah study started.
It's around 2003. She's been keeping
Okay.
me.
That's how many years I did it.
So we'll have to get that back up and running. Let's see, we got, there's me, hi. I'm dedicating this to all the technological gremlins that have crept in already this morning and which will be gone by next time. Ellen?
Well, I'd like to echo what Rob said. The bagels do taste better at TBY. And also, I would just like to salute this noble experiment in trying to do this hybrid style.
I suggested to Ellen and Rob and Sue that we bring lettuce this morning, since they're all guinea pigs. I like that Linda smiled and laughed at that. No one else did. Even David Zarno didn't think that was funny. David, how are you in San Diego?
San Diego, North County, in Carlsbad, in the village. I'm a village person. I love it.
A macho man, David.
Yeah, I'm a macho man, right?
All right, now Sue, this is.
I got attacked the other day.
You got attacked the other day?
Yeah, I got attacked by ransomware. Ellen's not laughing.
Thanks a lot, David. Ransomware.
Ransomware.
Sue Penn is here. She just started this week and we've thrown her in the deep end. Here she is at Torah study first time. Anything you'd like to dedicate Torah study to this week?
I would like to dedicate it to the staff and clergy who have welcomed me so warmly and the members, and thank you all. I'm really looking forward to working here.
Fabulous. Okay, so we're back on me. And let's see, who else would like to make a dedication? Linda.
It's not as much of a dedication, but may I make a suggestion? When you have all that light behind you, it puts you in shadow and you're not clear. So I didn't know if you wanted to sit yourself where there's a bookcase or something behind you, so that's just my Zoom suggestion for the day.
Good idea. All right, who else wants to make a dedication? Scotty.
Shabbat shalom, everybody. 20 years you did that, Nancy, and you were sorely missed, particularly on a Shabbat evening. And, you had the nice heavy hand with that wine and as a bartender. So we're so grateful that you were always there to bring this community of Tevel Bat Yam together. So I want to dedicate this to you, Nancy, to your family, and good health.
Fantastic, thank you, Scott. And I want to dedicate it to the latest Disney mugs. Thank you, Scott. And someone suggesting I hang a curtain behind me. I think that's a good idea. Thank you, Jimmy. Any other dedications? We've got Harley Bassman. Hi, Harley.
I'll just dedicate this to a happy and safe summer, seeing as we will be going to New York, to the Hamptons next week. And the time zones make it a little more challenging. So, but we'll be back in September.
Okay, well, we'd love to see you wherever you are, if you can make it. It'll be lunchtime there, so you can have a bagel with lunch and Torah study. Safe travels. Steve Edwards, you're in Park City, is that right?
We are, Rabbi, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, any other dedications before we jump into Torah study for this week? Okay. Well, let's jump right into it. We are in the final section of the book of Numbers. This is a double parsha, Matot-Masei. Thank you to Kathy for publishing all the page numbers. And we find ourselves, we're going to focus in on the second part of the double parsha, which is Masei. I'm going to put it up on the screen. And looking for a volunteer to read. Someone online who would like to read. And who would that be? Let's see, who's going to raise their hands to read? I see Mark, Ike, and Nancy, and Linda, so let's take that in order. Mark, Ike, right at the top there. And for the folks here in person, we are chapter 33, verse 1 of the book of Numbers. Okay, Mark, take it away.
These were the marches of the Israelites who started out from the land of Egypt, troop by troop, in the charge of Moses and Aaron. Moses recorded the starting points of their various marches as directed by the Eternal. Their marches by starting points were as follows. They set out from Ramses in the first month on the 15th day of the first month. It was on the morrow of the Passover offering that the Israelites started out defiantly in plain view of all of the Egyptians. The Egyptians, meanwhile, were burying those among them whom the Eternal had struck down, every male firstborn, whereby the Eternal executed judgment on their gods.
Okay, let's jump over to Nancy. Thank you, Mark.
The Israelites set out from Ramses and encamped at Sukkoth. They set out from Sukkoth and encamped at Etam, which is on the edge of the wilderness. They set out from Etam and turned about towards Pi-Hahiroth, which faces Baal Zephon, and they encamped before Migdol. They set out from Pi-Hahiroth and passed through the sea into the wilderness, and they made the 3 days' journey in the wilderness of Etam and encamped at Marah. They set out from Marah and came to Elim. There were 12 springs in Elim and 70 palm trees, so they encamped there. They set out from Elim and encamped by the Sea of Reeds. They set out from the Sea of Reeds and encamped in the wilderness of Sin. They set out from the wilderness of Sin and encamped at Dophkah. They set out from Dophkah and encamped at Alush. They set out from Alush and encamped at Rephidim. It was there that the people had no water to drink. They set out from Rephidim and encamped in the wilderness of Sinai. They set out from the wilderness of Sinai and encamped at Kibroth Hattaavah. They set out from Kibroth Hattaavah and encamped at Hazeroth. They set out from Hazeroth and encamped at Rithmah. They set out from Rithmah and encamped at Rimmon Perez. They set out from Rimmon Perez and encamped at Libnah. They set out from Libnah and encamped at Risa. They set out from Risa and encamped at Kehilath. They set out from Kehilath and encamped at Mount Seper. They set out from Mount Sheper and encamped at Haradah. They set out from Haradah and encamped from Tehath and encamped at Terah. They set out from Terah and encamped at Mizpah. They set out from Mizpah and encamped at Hashmonah. They set out from Hashmonah and encamped at Moseroth. They set out from
Let's give you a break. That's breaking your teeth on those. Thank you for soldiering through that. Linda Miller, we're going to get you to pick up.
I'll try. Nancy did such a good job with those. What verse am I again? 32?
I think that's right, yeah.
Okay. They set out from Bnei Jacan and encamped at Hor Haggidgad. They set out from Hor Haggidgad and encamped at Jotbath. They set out from Jotbath and encamped at Abranah. They set out from Abranah and encamped at Ezion Geber. They set out from Ezion Geber and encamped in the wilderness of Zin, that is Kadesh. They set out from Kadesh and encamped at Mount Hor on the edge of the land of Edom. Aaron the priest ascended Mount Hor at the command of the Eternal and died there in the 40th year after the Israelites had left the land of Egypt on the first day of the 5th month. Aaron was 123 years old when he died on Mount Hor. And the Canaanite king of Arad, who dwelt in the Negeb, in the land of Canaan, learned of the coming of the Israelites.
Okay, do we have another reader who would like to read the next slide? This is riveting stuff. There's a point to it all. Okay, Steve Sloan, AKA the voice of God.
Shabbat Shalom. They set out from Mount Hor and encamped at Zalmonah. They set out from Zalmonah and encamped at Punon. They set out from Punon and encamped at Oboth. They set out from Oboth and encamped at Iye Abarim in the territory of Moab. They set out from Iyim and encamped at Dibon Gad. They set out from Dibon Gad and encamped at Almon Diblathaim. They set out from Almon Diblathaim and encamped in the hills of Abarim before Nebo. They set out from the hills of Abarim and encamped in the steppes of Moab at the Jordan near Jericho. They encamped by the Jordan from Beth Jeshimoth as far as Abel Shittim in the steppes of Moab.
Okay, let's hold it right there. Thank you very much to all our readers. That was a particularly challenging pronunciation section of Torah. What do we notice about this articulation of the journey? What do we notice? What do we notice is there? What do we notice is perhaps missing from there? Jimmy Salkin, live from Vietnam, in lockdown.
Yeah. What happened to, it glossed over their lack of water. How is that resolved? You're going through this delineation of each step along the way, and suddenly it says they ran out of water. Well, how is it provided? How did they continue the journey without water?
So we know that there were several times in the narrative that water was a problem and there were miraculous solutions to that, but all we get here is a brief recognition that there was a grumbling and a murmuring as a result of a lack of water, but we don't know what happened in this articulation. Okay, so one thing that's missing is all the stories of water and how they were resolved, although there's a reference to one. Okay, thanks, Jimmy. Other ideas? Barbara, and then Linda, and then Scotty.
Where do the names of all these places come from? Were they cities or towns that were already set up, or did we just land in there and we gave them a name?
That's a great question, and I think for the most part, these it really depends on how you want to describe the Torah text. Certainly by the time it was written down, these were established place names. Okay, thanks, Barb. Linda, and then Scott, then Steve, then Jean. By the way, anyone here can raise their hands too. I do see physical. Okay.
Except for the end where it talks about end of the 40 years, it really doesn't talk how long it took to get from place to place or how physically far it was from place to place.
Great. Okay, so we're missing details of distance and time. Let's see, Scott Siegel in a beautiful garden setting.
Little humid upstairs. Yeah, I mean, they're like, hey, we're finally settling down, and then when everybody knocks on the tent, time to go, let's go, grab everything. And I don't know what the criteria is. They say, hey, we're hitting the next county, let's go, it's go time. I mean, I don't know what that criteria, how they decide to keep moving, but these details offer us the ability to bring some factual information and give more accuracy to our story of this Exodus and journey. You know, it's not just, well, they went from here to there. There's such details that for the future generations, it will ideally hold in their heart that these things happened.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Got Steve Edwards and then Jean Spiritus. By the way, I want to applaud Steve and those who found the raise the hand function. It does make it a lot easier to keep track of who's up next. So if you can use the raise the hand function, that would be great. Steve, could you just tell folks how they find that function?
Well, on my screen, on the bottom of the black bar on the bottom of the Zoom screen is a little icon for reactions, and you press that, and one of the choices is raise your hand.
Terrific. It puts you guys in a list on the top of my screen so I can easily keep track of who's up next. So thank you, Gene, for following those instructions. Steve?
Are you going to give the people in the room a yellow hand on a stick that they can?
That's exactly right.
All right. So the this list of the journey, it leaves out all the narratives. It doesn't talk about the spies. It doesn't talk about the giving of the 10 Commandments. It doesn't talk about all the stories along the way. It's simply it's a triptych. If everyone remembers what the Auto Club triptych of you go here, you go there. That's it.
Absolutely. So it's really the highlights, although there are two mentions of a little bit of detail. One was already described, which is the water disappearing. The other is right at the beginning, leaving Egypt, and the details, a little bit of the details there of leaving Egypt. So, okay, Gene and Bruce.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar to Steve, but it seems to me that there were three things. There was also the death of Aaron. But this is sort of like, if you were reading this as literature, that what comes next is an entire book of all the details. So that this was sort of like, from my perspective, this last chapter is sort of somebody came along and basically said, "Oh, the next book is Moses recounting the entire 40 years in detail. Let us give you as Steve said, let us give you the triptych." But what stood out was the three things that they did mention, which was the water, the sea of reeds, and Aaron. And then you ask yourself, why those three things?
That's a great question. All right, thank you, Jane. And Bruce Winters.
Good morning, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So I think it's just significant in that it tells you where you've come from, just like we follow where our ancestors came from, where our relatives came from. This is following where they came from. So I think that's the only significance of the individual places, that they came from different places. But it's interesting, I was reading something about the significance of the number, the 42 places that they went to. And someone was trying to come up with all the things about 42, about Jackie Robinson started a journey for Black people in baseball, and his number was 42, and they retired it after he retired. And the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was 42 places, and that sevens are significant, and that 7 times 6, we didn't quite get there. We didn't 7 times 7, but it was sort of, the journey still continues, that it was 7 times 6 is 42. And it was really an interesting analysis of why 42 places, and because numerology is so important in Judaism often. So, but that was, I thought that was significant and a really interesting kind of take on all the places that they stopped.
Yeah, I'm going with Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yeah, I knew you would.
Yeah, I'm definitely on with that. Thank you, Bruce. Harley, and then Rob, who's here, and then Steve Sloan.
This is being almost like a poem by Homer, like the Odyssey. Like there's like 500 years between when this happens and when it's written down, and how this got passed down from, I'm not sure if it was only the priests or if this was like done like as a part of your ordinary schoolwork to go and learn this as a poem and recite it by memory. Almost kind of like the Passover story in many respects. I mean, it's interesting detail that I'm not sure matters, but probably mattered a lot back then.
Yeah, so wondering if this was some kind of performative record, that they kept track of it all in a condensed form, like as we've been saying, the triptych, or maybe it's the contents, or like the beginning of the Seder in the Haggadah, where the first thing we do is go through all the sections, Kadesh, Chatz, Kapas, Yachatz, to remember all the sections. And then we go back and fill it out. Thank you, Harley. That's a great point too. And Steve Sloan, and then we're going to do a little breakout session. Steve Sloan.
Thank you, Rabbi. I just thought it was interesting that we always think of the Jews as wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, which they did. But pulling out my calculator and doing the very difficult math equation, it appears that means that on average, they moved in 42 places roughly once a year. We just came out of a year of being locked down, and it didn't go by exactly quickly. And so it just seems to me that although we think of the Jews, and just from this description of 42 places, that they were in constant motion, they actually spent a lot more time in camping than they did moving from place to place. I'm also curious. I was also curious. I know it's towards the beginning of the journey, but in that long list of names that we read, does one of them encompass Sinai?
Great question. Hold that thought.
Okay.
Back to it. Excellent. Excellent. You're an observant Jew, Steve. All right, Rob.
So I looked at this particular section so far as a crescendo, because we know ultimately where the Jews are going to wind up. And you can't appreciate a place where you are unless you look back and see all the steps it took to get there. So every step along the way had to be significant. And if we look at our own lives as where we're sitting now, we went through the same steps, probably a myriad of steps in where we've moved and where we've lived and where we ultimately wind up now. And so I think the whole tenet, it seems, of Judaism is always looking back and looking at his history. And I think so this is important because this is what was required, apparently, to ultimately get people where they are. So looking back and remembering is very important. It adds so much more perspective and depth to appreciate where you are at the present time as where you came from in the past.
Nice, thank you. Insightful as always, all of these comments. We're going to go into breakout rooms. Let's see here, there's going to be 5 breakout rooms with 5 participants per room, except this room, which is going to be its very own breakout room. And here's what I want you to discuss, and don't forget to appoint a spokesperson for your group. The question is, what events in the 40-year journey do you think should have been mentioned? Let's pick one event, or maybe debate 3 and pick which one is the one that you think deserves most mention. Given that all we heard about really was leaving Egypt and a little grumbling about water, what ought to have been mentioned? Let's see what you come up with. Going to give you, let's see here, 4 minutes, and then I'll give you a 30-second countdown. So this is just a brief one, and we'll come back and hear what everyone has to say. So enjoy the breakout rooms, and we'll see you back in just a few minutes. Okay, everyone's heading off to the breakout rooms. Sorry you can't see it. Let me see if I can get them up on the screen for this part. So you can see them. By the way, Steve Sloan said you were wearing a very fine shirt. Welcome back, everybody. I flipped you around. You can see the back of my head because I've got you all on the screen, so the folks here can see you. Full screen. There we go. Let's see. Room 1 was Jean Spiritus, Grace Deutsch, Marion Brett, Muriel Ash, Nancy Marcus. Who's the spokesperson from that group? There's a lot of shy people in that group. I'm going with Nancy.
I was going to nominate Muriel.
Muriel says no. Okay.
In terms of places, we obviously all felt that Sinai was missing and it was so pivotal. We also talked about the fact that God was not really present in this journey, that they left God out entirely. And were it not for God, those 24 springs never would have given enough water to the people, and then God caused Miriam, wherever she camped, for wells to spring up. So we were concerned about the two, Sinai and God.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's see, group 2, room 2 is Barbara Myers, the Gatira family, Holly Bassman, Linda Miller, and Steve Edwards, another shy group. Who's spokesperson for that group? Steve Edwards, no surprise there. Steve.
So we had a very freewheeling discussion, and also didn't really come to any conclusions, but the sense was that probably it was the giving of the 10 Commandments that was the central event in the formation of the Jewish people and its relationship with God, and it was odd that it was not mentioned. But we also thought that that was too obvious. There's probably something more subtle, but we couldn't find it.
Okay, no, there's not a trick question. There's lots of things that could have been included. So thank you to room 2. Room 3 is Ellen's iPad, Jerry Friedman, Jimmy Salkin from Vietnam, and Scott Siegel all the way from Bonita Canyon. Who's the speaker for that group? Jimmy Salkin.
Well, I was deferred from Rabbi Scott. While there were iconic events, the handing of the Torah was something that has underwritten the journey for our people. So that wasn't something that was significant to be repeated. However, what we came up with was, as Steve had alliterated, every stop was approximately a year. So every step along the way reinforced our journey and significantly added something to the credibility of our journey.
Something about the journey being as important as the destination, perhaps?
Right. That's always the case.
And you should know that, right, Jimmy?
Well, you've made a few trips down under, so.
That's true, but travel's a big part of your life.
Yes. It is. It's more the journey than. So the journey, each step of the way was significant in building the people.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jimmy. So room number 4, miraculously, Ellen Phillips is both here and online. I'm assuming that Ellen Phillips online is actually Gary. Correct. We've got Kathy Hayes, Mark Ike, and the Clevats. Who's the spokesperson for that shy group? Mark Ike.
Yes, we had a couple of different ideas. One of them was that Sinai is missing, along with all of the drama surrounding the handing down of the Torah. and the subsequent disaster of the golden calf. And, that's clearly missing. And then the other thing that Gary pointed out was there isn't any thing that indicates the occasion when spies were sent into Canaan with Joshua and Caleb. And also there wasn't anything indicating the disaster at, I think it was Meribah, where Moses struck the rock more than he should have, which ended up in his not being able to cross over to the promised land. So those were all points, places, or things that we didn't find in this rendition of facts of all of the places where they went, which Kathy Hayes said it's kind of like if you had a suitcase and you travel to a lot of places, and in days past, you'd get these stickers on your suitcase that would indicate, someone looked at your suitcase, they'd say, well, you went here, and you went there, and you went to this other place. And, it's just a dry rendition of the places they went to, almost like a police report. And, it was like on Dragnet, where Joe Friday, would say to the person, just the facts, man. And that went into the report. No, nothing other than the facts. That was our.
Nice. It's the stickers on the suitcase, or maybe the stamps in the passport.
Right.
Okay, so before we jump to room 5, we're going to jump to room Marcus Library, and that's our 3 illustrious guinea pigs. Rob Greenfield with a fabulous shirt, Ellen Phillips, who's managed to be in 2 places at once, and Supan, who's been thrown into the deep end. First week, Torah study. Who's going to be the brave soul to represent this group? Rob? Okay, let me get the camera over to Rob. We're away, of course. Yeah, there we go. There's Rob.
So all the groups so far really mentioned really wonderful things that we thought about as well. Things to add is we thought about the burning bush, when God revealed himself to Moses at the very beginning of the journey. And the other thing we mentioned that hadn't been mentioned so far is the golden calf. Because sometimes it's important to acknowledge our mistakes as well as our accomplishments. And so that was important too. We mentioned certain battles that the Israelites prevailed in. It might have been something that marks their history as they went forward. But I think one of the things that maybe comes to mind is, irrespective of what happened, good or bad, they continued to march on to their destiny. And irrespective of what they went through, it didn't necessarily deter them from where ultimately they were hoping to reach their goal of promised land.
Nice. Okay, and our last group is room 5, a particularly quiet group. Bruce Winters, David Zano, Rhoda Shapiro, Sophia Zaslavsky, and Steve Sloan, who is our speaker. Why do I feel like there are 3 speakers for that group? Steve Sloan, who, by the way, has a very nice shirt himself.
Wow. Thank you, Rabbi. Yeah, we actually just sat in silence. These are very quiet people. No opinions. They actually seem to be very interested in the names of the places themselves. Our resident Hebrew speaker, David Zarno, pointed out that he thought that if we deconstructed and looked deeply into the Hebrew itself, that there might be some clues within the names of these places as to what their relevance were for us historically, which would be an interesting little venture. The places that we came up with, initially Sinai, but that was struck down by Bruce Winters because he has the authority to strike down Sinai. And we went instead with the golden calf, a related item. And he also threw out the splitting of and crossing the Red Sea. The spies incident, certainly we thought was a major incident that was somehow omitted. And also the location where the Mishkan and all of the ornaments were constructed. And I might throw in on my own at the end here, the rather major battle that if we had not won, may not have gone well for us. The battle near the beginning with, was it the armies of Amalek, where Moses was on the hill and his arms were supported and raised. That was a rather important event as well, that none of these were specifically mentioned.
Absolutely. So the biggest theme that kind of came through that I'm hearing from all the different groups is firstly that a lot of things are missing, and secondly that Sinai is the big one, although there are plenty of other events that got missed. I'm going to take these guys off the screen so I can see them. Let's see, Harley Bassman wanted to say something. Harley.
I just wanted to push back on this whole concept here because everyone's going with Sinai and golden calf and breaking the commandments. I view this whole thing as this story starts after the Sinai and all that and the spies. It's basically year 2 or 3 to year 40, so a 38-year journey over 42 sites. And I also heard the question differently. I heard it more as not a single event, but as a process. Like what themes took place over this 38-year, as I mark it in Torah time, period. And my idea was this notion of how we intellectually, emotionally, spiritually convert a slave generation into a generation that doesn't know slavery, which was the whole purpose of the 40 years.
Nice. Okay. Thank you, Harley. David Zarno.
So I'm impressed with the situation of the Torah where we know there are no wasted words in Torah. And as a result, I look at the phrasing of the Torah passage that we read, and we see we go from point X to point Y, and then from point Y to point Z, and then from point Z to someplace else. We repeat it in pairs. In other words, maybe it's not maybe the Torah is telling us it's not the same place when we got there as when we left. It's like it's telling us something is different, and perhaps we the people are different. It's like anything else. You get to one place, you have immediate impressions, and you're in one state of mind, and by the time you leave, you're in a different state of mind and a different place. Even though you're emotionally you're in a different place, spiritually you may be in a different place. And so I think that's pretty insightful from the standpoint of the way the Torah is written. And I wonder if the rabbis comment on that. Again, why repeat the name of the place upon arrival and then repeat it upon departure? Why not just say, we went from here to here to here to here? And I think there's...
Why repeat where they came from? I like that very much. So I want to propose something that hasn't come up at all, and this is just a wild theory, but maybe it will resonate. You know, it's often asked, given how uncomfortable, allegedly, I've heard, it is to deliver a baby, how is it that anyone who has done such a thing ever does it again? And I've heard an answer to that question is, we forget. So here's a lot of people are disagreeing with me. But my point is as follows. When we have an arduous journey, while it's happening, it feels particularly arduous. When we're going through medical school, every day may seem like a slog. When we are doing some big project or whatever it's pronounced here, we really feel the difficulty as we go. But when we get to the end, it's strange how we kind of forget how hard that was. Oh, it wasn't so, medical school wasn't so hard. I'd go back to it again. Having a baby wasn't, I shouldn't, I'm just quoting what I'm hearing from us. Having a baby wasn't so bad. Let's go around again. Is it possible that the truncated description is a reminder that at some degree, or in some sense, the people of Israel looked back and it didn't seem so difficult, didn't seem so arduous, that 40 years, all the difficulties faded away, all the challenges, the Korach rebellion, the golden calf, all of those things just disappeared from their consciousness. And it all became just this one big journey. And so I want to break up again, but this time I want to ask a different question. I want to say, as we look back on the last year, which was, I think for all of us, quite an extraordinary experience, what do you think we've kind of forgotten we had to deal with that has disappeared in our memories as a year has gone? And what are we kind of glad to have forgotten? And what do we really want to hang on to as a memory that maybe we want to pass down? So again, what have we forgotten? Try and call to mind what we've forgotten, and what ought we remember as we hopefully climb out of this, not 40 years, but 1 and a bit years of being together. I'm going to put you in the same groups you were in at the same time, 4 minutes, and look forward to hearing your responses. See you back in a few minutes. Okay, they're all heading off into their groups. So what do you think, guys? What?
Rabbi, are you asking what from the last year or year and a half?
Last year and a half during the pandemic.
Oh, so close, it's hard to.
The fear. In the beginning, we were all so afraid. We didn't know what it was. We didn't know if we were going to get through it, and we didn't know how we would cope and get through it. And I found it overwhelming in the beginning. And I'm very glad.
There's so much unknown, right?
Yeah.
I'm still afraid. I think we're going to have a huge resurgence because of the new variant. I thought that from the beginning. Nature of viruses. And the nature of the divisions in this country that have politicized a vaccination, for goodness sakes.
I think we're built with design, because it's so true that when people go through hardship, major surgery, after a while, oh, it wasn't so bad. I think if it stuck with us, we'd all have clinical depression. But I think it's built in us that we shouldn't be like that, or we don't look to be like that. We look to move ahead and try to maybe forget about it a little bit as well. But it's so true. What Rabbi said about medical school, or spending an all-nighter and suffering for a test, then it's over. It's like, okay, done.
But I don't think Jews are forgetters. Clearly, you have to keep telling this story over and over again.
It's true, but I think it's not something that's a showstopper. You pick yourself up and you move on.
Well, that's kind of a different.
Right, and I think we
But I don't
take the
think you forget.
story
But you
more
don't
from the
forget.
perspective of where and what, as opposed to how we felt. Like we're taking the emotion out of the repetition of the story.
Well, I guess I'm carrying into the feelings.
Well, if you think, I'm just looking at, like, say, Pesach.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine how afraid the Jews must have been?
But you're
before
supposed to
the
feel
season?
like you're coming out of Egypt.
But
That's
when
what's-
you read the story, you're not necessarily saying they were petrified. There was this big water in front of them and there were all these Egyptians coming upon them. They're not describing the fear, they're just describing the situation. So we could be taking the emotion out of the retell, I think.
But couldn't you feel it more this year because of the?
Oh, absolutely.
And what
There
about
you go.
people who lost loved ones? For them, they ultimately, they'll never forget, but they have to move on. Ultimately, that's the whole idea of how we grieve. So the idea is, it's not to forget, but you try to rationalize it, so it's not a showstopper for you that's going to stop you in your life and you're not going to go on. So I think and we should learn from every time we have a hardship. Even now, like what are we going to do next for the next pandemic? How are we going to better prepare ourselves and our country? I mean, that's what we have to be thinking about now. Turn the bad experience into something that can maybe help us move us ahead in the future.
And not let the fear hold
Rabbi,
us
you've
back.
always said is also, look, if it wasn't for the pandemic, we wouldn't have had the Zoom possibilities and look at all of the options that we now have for connecting and learning.
I think, yeah, it is not, we have to look forward with a positive mindset and not let the fear hold us back. But some people did get caught. A lot of people got caught with the mental health and the depression. That was in smart for so many people, right?
We have a huge problem with kids not wanting to return to school. I don't know what's going to happen when we start back. I think it's going to be a huge.
What are they saying is the reason they don't want to return to school?
They're afraid. Some of their families didn't get vaccinated, so they're not getting vaccinated. It affects the staff because we don't know who's vaccinated, and of course, nobody wants to have a, show your vaccination proof. And I think we're still in a lot of disarray. I think people think we've come out of it, and I think that's a mistake.
All right, they've got a 30-second warning to come back. And I'll put them back up on the screen. There. Let's get rid of this. Yeah, we definitely need to have a separate computer just with the grid view. Make a big difference. All right, welcome back, everybody. Hope that was an interesting discussion. We're going to go back in reverse order. So, room 5. Who's going to share from room 5? Bruce Winters.
So I think I was volunteered. Yes. So we started with the more mundane. Oh, am I unmuted? Yes. We started with toilet paper and the obvious, and then we moved into things that were definitely life-changing this year. And from the uncertainty, which seemed to diminish over time, but was very stressful at the beginning, to what our health, the health issues that changed over time, to the real life-changing things that some of us had. And not to point out, but the obvious, but Rhoda had the biggest change in life over the last year and has had to figure out how to continue life without Ralph. And we all felt that by far that was a significant thing that changed all our lives, because we all miss Ralph too.
Yeah, absolutely. The people who are lost during the pandemic, people who died during the pandemic, whether related to the pandemic or not, they will be missed. And death during the pandemic was very different than pre-pandemic in terms of the ability of people to come together physically and remember. And I was blessed to see Ralph towards the end, but even that visit was not as it ought to have been. Had to come in through the back porch, and just a very brief visit. Rhoda, we're thinking of you and sending hugs your way. And did you take a fall, Rhoda? Looks like you've got black eyes. Are you okay? Rhoda?
Yes, I'm doing okay, thank you. Although I had a bad fall and hit my head. But I went to Hoag and I had a CAT scan and I'm okay. So I'm doing okay. That was a double whammy.
Wow, well, we're sending refuah shlema. Good to see. I'm glad you jumped on the call. That's really something. Okay, so that's room 5, room library. For those of us here in person, what would you want to say?
Well, we also discussed the fact that it gave us pause, and at first there was a great deal of uncertainty, which was difficult to deal with. But But then there were blessings like the ability to connect via technology with Zoom and other things like that. And also that you do sort of forget how fearful you were at the beginning. And then you begin to like hope. So the resilience of human beings to go on even in the face of adversity.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. Let's see, room 4 with Kathy, Linda, Mark, and Gary. Who's going to say something from that group? Mark Ike.
I think that generally the feeling was that with the pandemic, there were opportunities to do new things. And Kathy made the point that she had started a reading program with books that are popular in American reading. And Gary also made the point, there were things that kind of opportunities that came out of it. And I found that too. And the thing that I had noticed was in the beginning of the pandemic, I felt kind of a resentment about people who didn't wear their masks or do all of the things that they were supposed to do. And now after, I guess it's a year and a half almost, I look and I see, that where 45% of the people are not vaccinated. And but there's this weariness that I feel of the whole mask thing and everything. And if I see someone driving a car with their mask on, or walking down the street with a mask on, and it's like a reminder of something that I wish would just go away, honestly. So, there were a lot of things that came out of the whole experience, that were good for some people. For me, it was a tremendous challenge of trying to keep my business together, and I'm still suffering the effects of that. But, and then there were the people that we lost along the way that we didn't have a chance to see in person.
Yeah.
As we were talking about with Rhoda, we all feel that loss of Ralph, and and there are other people that I know that I didn't have the opportunity to really see them again in person. So it was just such a rich experience that you look back at it and you think, how could I even pick what was most significant? And that was sort of the impression of the conclusion we reached.
Great. Thank you. Let's see, Ellen, Jerry, and Jim. We got, looks like Jerry's going to talk this time. Hey, Jerry.
Hello. Well, we missed Scott because I guess he was on the planet Vulcan during the period of our breakout this time. But we were talking about memories, what you remember, what you don't remember. And, psychology will say that you will block out some bad memories and you won't remember those. And maybe there's an instance there. And as far as the past year, I remember incidents of waiting in line for 20 minutes to get into a Costco or those instances. And I think we'll remember parts of those pandemic, and 5 years from now, who knows what we remember what we happened during this past year and a half. But our memory is selective.
Yeah. And let's see, we got Barbara Myers, Gatira family, Holly Bassman, Linda Miller, Steve Edwards. Is that who's raising their hand? Never. Steve. Thank you, Steve.
So we thought that the pandemic brought home in a remarkable way how interconnected the world is and how much we're all impacted by the responsible or irresponsible actions of any individual, which was kind of a remarkable realization of something we should have been thinking about anyway. And also, we were there's some sentiment that it really forced you to focus on what's important. That when your life kind of gets distilled down to a much smaller area of activity, that you have to really start thinking about what's important, and how lucky we were to have the technology to maintain the connectiveness. That even though we were missing the ability to hug people, we still were able to keep in contact. This Torah class being an example that, yeah, the pandemic being a terrible thing, but at least we were able to continue to meet on a regular basis and share all these lessons of our people. We don't want to forget the fact that so many people have died in this country and around the world. And we're thinking that probably what will fade with time is that sense of isolation and that sense of fear and that sense of uncertainty.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. And our last group, Jane Spiritus, Grace Deutsch, Marion Bretz, Muriel Ash, and Nancy Marcus, another shy group. Who's the rep for that group? Oh, Nancy.
We talked first about the fact that we think we're still too close to really answer this question, that we need more time. But we talked about the fact that some of us will never be comfortable again in large crowds. And the number of people that died is just horrific when we look back over the year and a half. But the more interesting question is, as a society, where are we going? What is this younger generation thinking that is taking over? So those were our primary thoughts.
Wow, it's really extraordinary how each of the groups went in some ways similar directions, but also in different directions. And so many insights. I know the great psychology duo of Tversky and Kahneman did a famous experiment where they took, I think it was with colonoscopies. It might have been with colonoscopies. They took half the group of people. They all had an unpleasant colonoscopy, but half of them, they kept the colonoscopy device in for an extra 30 seconds, during which time it wasn't moved around, so it wasn't uncomfortable. And then that was the only difference. So the one group had the uncomfortable colonoscopy, and then it was taken out. The other had the uncomfortable colonoscopy, and then comfortable for 30 seconds, and then it was taken out. The group that had the extra 30 seconds rated the experience better than the group that didn't have the extra 30 seconds, because we are biased to the last thing we remember in any experience, which is why they say, a movie or a book or, a speech has to end with something good and memorable, because people take away the final thing. So, perhaps how this pandemic ends, and it's not yet ended, will determine ultimately how we all look back and think about it. But hopefully there'll be many things that we remember as well as we go into it. So I want to ask, just go back, and this will be the final kind of Torah thing, and then I want to get into a little bit of housekeeping. We did note that Sinai was missing. The mountain, the revelation, and as I mentioned last night during services, the commentators noticed this, and the explanation that I find most compelling is the reason Sinai isn't mentioned is because once revelation takes place, Sinai comes with us. Just as we were all there in Sinai, those who were born, those who weren't yet born, those who joined the Jewish people, every soul was there. So too Sinai travels with us wherever we go. And it's symbolized by the Torah that we carry with us. The communities that we build surrounding Torah in Israel, in Babylonia, across the Middle East, the Roman Empire, through Europe, to the New World and beyond, through every phase, we carry Sinai with us, and we interpret it and we learn from Sinai, symbolizing all the revelation that has taken place through the years. And it builds community, it builds support, and it puts everything into perspective. So the reason Sinai is not mentioned is because it's not past. It's past, present, and future, and it ties it all together. So hopefully that's something that we will take with us. We've been doing Torah study here for getting close to 20 years, and every time we go around, the Torah is the same, but we're different, the world is different. This is the first time we've gone around in a pandemic. We've done more than the full cycle. And the Torah continues to provide us insights and guidance and concepts that help inspire us and give us some sense of comfort during these challenging times. So hopefully it will continue to do so. I have no doubt about that. So I want to turn to some housekeeping. Now that we've trialed the technology and already got some upgrades in mind. I don't know how quickly we can get curtains up, but I have some upgrades in mind. I want to hear from you. We know some people are already scared of crowds, and no judgments here, but I'm just wondering how people feel about coming back in person next week. We're all set up here. We have our Keurig coffee machine. Right now we've got Bruegger's Bagels. We're going to offer the online option, both for those who are further away, whether it be Vietnam or Utah or anywhere else, but also for those who aren't comfortable coming back in person or have mobility issues, transport issues, to be able to join us. Raise your hand if you think you'll be back here in person next week. We've got, seeing a bunch of hands go up. I'm just going to take a couple of samples of people, what you say about that. So Linda Miller and Bruce, tell us about your thoughts on coming back.
We're very happy to come back in person. I feel very comfortable with it. Last week, I had 2 in-person all-day mediations. It was just so wonderful to see people and interact. It's different. And it felt really good to be back. Beside that, we want bagels. As I commented when we were in our small group, one of the joys of this last year is bringing us back to the temple and joining Torah study, which I don't know that we would have done had it not been for the option during the pandemic. So we are looking forward to joining in person for the first time.
Nice. Kathy.
Well, I'm as much as I love doing the Zoom because I can have all my books here and I won't schlep them to the temple. I miss seeing people in person. Throughout the whole thing, I didn't have to shake hands or hug people, but I miss talking to them in person and getting that feedback too. So I look forward to that.
Okay, Mark Eichen.
I think it's very much something that I look forward to being in person again. The only consideration that I haven't heard said yet is that I think we might need a bigger venue, because there's a lot of people that probably would like to come to this that have only been on Zoom and maybe have only been introduced to this through Zoom. like Linda Miller was indicating. And
Yeah.
so, but I think it would be a really positive thing. I think it's also would be a positive thing to keep the Zoom option as well, because I make my periodic trips to the Black Hills, and I love to get up on Shabbat morning and join the Torah study, and I've been able to do that.
So that's why we're doing this this tech check, so we can iron out as many gremlins as we can for next week. There'll be next week, to be honest with you, even with the improvements we're going to have by having extra people in the room, the owl device that's in the middle of the room, keeping track of who's speaking in here, is going to be fighting for attention. So, but we'll see how that goes. That'll be an experiment too. But we're absolutely committed to keeping this hybrid, and I think that's the new world. Jerry.
Yes, thank you. I like the double option. Transportation wise, I'd like to make it sometimes, but sometimes I'll not be able to make it. And but I miss sitting next to Dr. Jerry Wolf at our table. And I want to say I was talking to Mark last night at services, and I'm going to miss Nancy not pouring me a glass of wine prior to the services.
Yeah, maybe I've seen in some places they're doing virtual. They're using robots to like as avatars. So maybe we can have a robot avatar of Nancy here pouring wine. What do you think, Nancy?
I'm going to miss being with you guys so much. That was one of the reasons I resisted moving, but I was outvoted. But I would be there in person next Saturday, no question. And the wine is easy. We just need to pre-pour it and line it up. And then just monitor it, who takes it. But someone's got to volunteer for bagels next week.
Before we end, we need a volunteer, or a couple of volunteers. Clevats, Linda.
Yes, thank you for unmuting me. I would feel comfortable if I knew everyone had been vaccinated, because Sydney and I both had COVID and it was a very difficult year.
Yeah. So let me just mention how we're going to handle this. I'm going to, in all of our advertising, we would make the point that if you're unvaccinated, we would urge you to consider remaining at home and joining us by Zoom if you're unvaccinated. If you do come and you're unvaccinated, then we would respectfully request that while you're inside, you put on your mask. But we're not checking anyone's vaccination cards. We're going to assume people are acting honorably and honestly about that. It is our experience from the first 6 weeks of in-person services in the amphitheater that well over 90% of our people were vaccinated. The only group that is not vaccinated really is the group that is not yet eligible. That's the under 12-year-olds, and I'm not expecting kids to be attending Torah study at the moment. Even if we get a few teens, they are almost certainly going to be vaccinated. So again, if you're unvaccinated, we really urge you to stay home or come here with a mask on. So I think to answer your questions, you're probably going to be surrounded by people who are vaccinated. Linda?
But not, yeah. So it's the risk. How much risk are you willing to take?
I would say the risk is pretty infinitesimal in this setting because most of our people are pretty honorable about this. And we have a very low rate of vaccine hesitancy in our community. Even people, to be honest, that I would have pegged as vaccine hesitant have turned out not to be. So okay. I would say you're way more at risk going to Starbucks or supermarket, with a random assortment of Orange County population. Although in Orange County, our rates are so low of cases, and the vaccination rate is quite high. I think, frankly, Orange County is pretty safe at this point, certainly if you're vaccinated. Did you guys, I know that you had COVID, Linda and Sid, but have you already been vaccinated? Because I know there was a period of time.
Yeah. Yes.
So you were extremely safe. And just to get reflection on that, I'm going to go to one of our dynamic doctor duo, Gene Spiritus. You want to comment on risk of coming to Torah study?
I think it's very, very small. I will say one thing though, the room is small, so I think you would probably want to limit the room to not more than 20 or 25 people, 20 people. I mean, I think that's, there's this, when we were really at 40, 45 people in the room, I would have some hesitancy about that because I wouldn't be going into a room. I wouldn't go to a restaurant right now with 40 or 45 people in a small restaurant. So, I think the risk is infinitesimal, but you sort of worry about room size. So my sense would be, I'd like to have the doors open in Torah study. I'd probably like to limit, the total number.
He's glitching. I don't know why.
He does sometimes.
Yeah.
Must be.
Okay. Thanks, Gene. Well, I'm going to.
I think there's a room number that might feel uncomfortable for some people.
Okay. Well, obviously, people will choose based on their comfort level. Sophia, and then Ellen.
Yeah, I was wondering if we can have an outside setup, maybe a tent or some kind of shelter, an enclosure, partial enclosure, but open for the people to breathe freely. And that might be a resolution for that situation. Not inside, but outside.
We're not going that direction. We believe the case rates are low enough and the vaccination rates are high enough that this space will do the trick. Plus, as Jean mentioned, opening the doors on both sides and cranking up the fan, there'll be a lot of circulation of fresh air. And I don't think a tent would be any better, to be honest. Plus we can't really technically do it with the equipment. So, reminder, anyone who's not comfortable, stay home, and we'll love to have you on Zoom. That's why we're doing this. Ellen.
I was just wondering if we had access to just using the chapel or the sanctuary. I mean, we have large spaces that are not being used.
Well, some weeks they will be used because we're going to have Torah, we're going to have bar mitzvahs and so on. But also, you can't really do Torah study the way we do it if it's in theater style. So that's why we're doing it this way. We'll see who comes. Raise your hand if you think you'll be staying home. I'm just curious to hear and why. Okay, Muriel.
Yeah, I don't live very close. I live in Laguna Woods, and this has been very convenient for me to just enjoy seeing everybody in their little squares, seeing everybody's face, which I enjoy doing. I enjoy also hearing some dear Sophia Zaslavsky clearly, which in our large room I never could. So I really like this format for study. I think we're able to face one another and say our piece. I'm for continuing. I'm glad we're going to have the option.
Okay, great. So Muriel, you're articulating really mainly a geographic issue, but also the format lends itself to hearing and seeing everyone, which is not always easy to do in this big space. Steve Edwards, you're not coming in person while you're in Park City?
No, I'm not. But it's interesting for me. One of the blessings of the pandemic was that I got to attend the Torah study for both because of the hour time difference. I could electronically attend 2 Torah studies on Saturday morning, and each Torah study always brought different insights into the week's lesson. And it's when I don't know. I'm really struggling with that right now. How I'm gonna react to that, depending on how the hybrid versions work. I will say, Gerst, that your technology right now is light years better than the technology we're starting to use here in Utah. So I give you kudos for that.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Steve. I think Utah, things come a little later in Utah. Is that right? Or I'm just kidding.
Yeah. We're the Republic of Park City, so you gotta think of it as different than the rest of Utah.
Okay, got it. I'm not going to touch that one with the 10-foot pole. Let's see, Marion, I think I saw you say you were going to stay home. Marion, what do you think?
I am going to probably stay home the first time. I'm not going to put my toe in the water first. I'm not going into that Red Sea without figuring out if somebody drowning before me. And that's my nature. I am extremely cautious. I was extremely afraid, as I told my group. It was like being in a war zone, and I didn't recover from it very well. There are still vestiges of it left in the corners of my mind. And so I am going to be very cautious. I may come the second time when it's open, but not the first.
Okay. And I just want to reiterate, I totally respect that. And it's exactly for this reason that we are going to such lengths to provide the Zoom and trying to get this hybrid right. It would be a lot easier to just stream the Torah service from a technology point of view. Not the Torah service, the Torah study from a technology point of view, but we would lose the interactivity. And that's really where I think the value of this is. And so I fully respect that people will have many different reasons for wanting to stay home, whether it's accessibility, transport, even convenience, that's fine. And certainly for fear and caution about the pandemic, totally understandable. At the same time, I know there'll be many people, or some people at least, who'll be happy to come in person. So we'll see who's here next week. I want to check in, last of all, with Grace Deutsch. Grace, do you think you'll be joining us here, or will you be staying in Hawaii?
Are you talking to me, Rabbi?
Grace, so I'm wondering if you think you'll make it here next week in person, or whether we'll have you on Zoom next.
I'm very cautious. I tend to be cautious, and I probably will be staying home.
Okay. Well, and Rhoda, how about you?
I think I will stay at home. I did come one time to Friday night services, and I found it terribly personally painful. So that's the way it is. So I do appreciate coming on Zoom, and it's helping me a lot, but I think I'll continue that way for a while.
Hard to imagine being in here at Torah study without Ralph and his insights and his unique perspective on the Torah. We certainly miss him, and I can see why that would be especially hard for you, Rhoda.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Well, everyone, thank you for another wonderful Torah study. We got to see each other from around the corner, around the world. And remember, Sinai is with us wherever we go, wherever our journey takes us. And looking forward to the next chapter starting next week in person. Oh, we didn't get a bagel volunteer. Who wants to be the bagel bringers for next week? Do we have any volunteers? Dun, 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 dun. Otherwise, we'll have to chase someone up during the week.
I can take care of it.
Sue's jumping in. Okay. Sue and Ellen. Okay. We've got next week covered, and we'll have to come up in the meantime with a schedule. Remember, as quoted by Rob Greenfield, the bagels are better at Bat Yam.
New logo.
Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay sane. Lots of love. Bye, guys.